Hi, my name is Mike, and we're here in Ohio, and I'm setting up a scenario here of how to build a fire with wet wood. I've been in this situation many times, and I've made many mistakes, and I would like to share with you what I've learned and what I think is a really neat, cool way to build a fire. And so the scenario is this: it's been raining for days, everything is wet. It looks like even the ground is saturated. The wood is soaked with water. It looks like there's no way you can start a fire. If you follow these steps, you should be successful in being able to start a fire. Here's the materials that you have. You have a small hand axe. You have a saw. You have one dry match. Everything else is wet. And so what we're going to do now, since this wood is dry, I've gone into the woods and I'm looking for a specific type of size of wood. I'm looking for something about that big around on a male adult, so maybe it's about 2.5 inches in diameter. It's fairly straight and it needs to be about that long. I'm looking for a piece of standing wood, not laying down on the ground where it's been soaking up moisture or water. It needs to be dead but standing. Maybe a branch has fallen out of a tree and it's leaning against another tree branch, or maybe it's something that is still. We wouldn't want to cut anything off of a live tree if we think it might be dead, so that goes against leave no trace principles. But we're looking for something that's standing or leaning, but definitely dead and had time to dry. I can tell by this has been drying for a long time. This I'm not too sure of because I haven't gotten inside of it yet. It might be green, but we're going to find out. So I've got two samples here to work with. We're going to wet them down and make sure they're soaked. Okay, so what we're going to do here is wet down this wood and make sure it's good and soaked. We're going to pick one of these pieces of wood and we're going to make a fire setup with it and light it with one match is our goal. This piece has real thick bark on it. Looks like it's good and dead. And we'll find out how dead this piece is once we get inside of it. So one of these two will be my choice. I've got two samples to work with. And I'll pick one and we'll go through the steps. So that looks good and saturated, so we'll get to the next step then. Okay, so we got our wood that's saturated. I'm gonna pick one of these to work with. This one looks maybe like it's a little too rotted. I'm gonna see if this one's gonna work for us. It's about 2.5 inches in diameter. And what I'm looking for is a 5-inch section, a 10-inch section, and a 15-inch section. And so I'm going to pick this piece right here for about 5 inches, and my hand's about 9 inches, so there's about 5, 10, and 15. It looks like there's probably about 15 inches there. So I'm going to start cutting, and it's nice that this knot is here, and what I'm looking for is for the 10-inch section to not have any knots or not have any branches. So this piece might work out very nicely for us. So we'll use this for a stand. Okay, there's our 5-inch piece, 10 inches, gonna be about right there. You'll see why that's important in a minute. This is the piece that we're gonna get our burning wood from. And it's important that it's as straight as can be and not have as few knots, because we're gonna be splitting this section of wood. It needs to be fairly short so it splits easily, and it needs to be not so big and round in diameter that there's a lot of work involved in cutting it. So if this were a 6 or 8 inch diameter piece of log, I'd be working a lot harder. So I'm trying to do this in the most efficient manner. So there's our 10-inch section. So this piece is going to be, we're going to make a chopping block out of this. This is going to be the piece of wood we're going to split into dry wood. We're going to try to get the center wood out of it. And I'm looking at the center. Looks like there's a little bit of rot, but it looks like it's plenty dry. And we'll see if this is going to work for us. And this piece right here, about a 15 to 20 inch piece, this is going to be our hammer or our whammer for our axe. So that's why we got 3 different pieces here. So let's start off and make a chopping block. And what I'm going to try to do is not swing this axe because I want to do it in a safe way. I want to try to do this so that I've taken many scouts to the emergency room because they do this. They try to hold a piece of wood and they think they can get their hand out of the way quick enough. Don't do this. So we're not swinging an axe here. And that's the important thing with this whammer, is we don't have to swing an axe to split wood, because we can just put the axe where we want it. I'm going to pound this in a little bit. And remember that this ground theoretically is saturated with water. Okay. Now I'm going to split that off in half. I'm trying to get a flat on here, a working flat. Maybe I can do that with my... Okay. So there's my little workstation. I might be able to use this too, but since that's round on the top, I'm going to use this as my chopping block. The wood's a little bit too dead. It didn't split all the way through. That's okay. That's what's going to happen in this situation. So now what we want to try to do, this is wet on the outside, but the wood inside is dry. So up to probably about 1/4 of an inch in, this wood's going to be dry even on a rainy day. So first of all, what we want to do is see if we can get rid of this wet bark. Let's see if this axe is going to be very good at shaving the bark off. And if it isn't, I'll get my knife out. The knife is also one of the materials that we have. If the axe is good and sharp, we should be able to get this wet bark off the outside, depending on how tight the bark is. And so in this scenario, there've been many times I've been camping or outdoors where I'd love to have a fire, but everything just looks like it's too wet. And so this is what I've come up with for a way to rectify that, especially in the wintertime. When you're camping in the wintertime, you need fire because it gets dark so early. So I'm just kind of shaving the bark off. It's wet, so I want to get it off the outside of the log. We never know what kind of wood we're going to be working with unless you're really good at identifying wood from its bark. I'm guessing this might be maple, but I'm not sure. And here again, I'm not swinging this axe, and I'm moving it away from me. So that right there has gotten a big step towards eliminating the moisture on the outside of the log. But some of this is still a little damp. I can feel it. So I'm going to get this wet bark out of the way. Put my chopping block down again. And so now what I want to do is to cut off the outside bark. See if we can get the outside bark to split. And it looks like because it was rotten, it's probably not going to split all the way down like I'm hoping it to be. Now what I could do is I could have got a shorter, you could go a little bit shorter here, and this will probably split easier. So that's one of those decisions you need to make. So I'm going in about 1/4 of an inch, because I think that, yeah, that's what I was afraid is going to happen. Going in about 1/4. I'm going to go a little bit deeper and see if I can get it to split all the way down. And a little better. I think we can still work with this. Come over here. Since this is splitting off, what I'm going to do is go ahead and split this in half and then work this outside wetness off. I'm going to keep track of it. You can see I'm getting into the, in fact I can feel that it's pretty dry right there. So I'm going to see if I can split this all the way through with my whammer. Yeah, that's more like it. And then I'm going to split it in half again. I think what I'm going to do here, I want to end up with about 6 or 8 what I'm going to call splits. These things here, I'll call those splits. Need 6 or 8 of those that are on the dry side of the piece of wood. I'm going to look for the bark, and I'll know that's not the dry side. So I can split this again. Okay, we'll do the other one. There's a knot right there, so I'm going to flip it around and work from this side. And maybe I'm going to I'm going to see if it'll let me do a wedge. So I've got a sharp edge there. Yeah, I like that sharp edge right there. That's going to help us out. So I'll try that again. See if I can get another sharp edge. Because we're going to be making shavings, and that edge will help us out. And I kind of need to keep track of where the bark is, because that wood could still be wet where the bark is. Okay, I'm going to try, see if it'll let me split it again. I'm going to try to work with this wood and get as many splits as the piece of wood will allow me to have. It just kind of depends, I think, sometimes on how dead the wood is and what type of wood it is. But we want these to be as thin as possible. There's a pretty thick one. I'm going to see if I can split it. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm shooting for 6 or 8 of these wedge-shaped sections. Okay, so there's what we're going to be working with. And set this off to the side. And so this is the wet side. And so maybe I'm going to go ahead and peel that bark off as much as I can. Still going to be a little damp, so I'll prepare each one of these. Of course, it's important to have a sharp knife, always, and axe. Still going to be a little damp underneath this bark, and I'm going to pay attention to where that is and try not to use those shavings from there on my fire directly. Okay. Now you might notice that I've got this bungee cord for my knife, so I don't lose it. I can fish it out of my pocket quickly if I need it. Something's been very helpful for me to not lose my knife. I always know where it is. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is work on some shavings. And I'm going to get my raincoat over here since it's been raining. Got a raincoat, and maybe the outside of my raincoat is wet. So I'm going to use the inside of the raincoat to catch my shavings. Now, I saw this on a video, a fellow up in Alaska. Again, I'm not sure what his name is, but give him credit for this idea. I really love this idea because when you're making shavings, they spray all over the place. And so this is a way to catch your shavings. And so what I want to do here is I'm going to be pounding one end of this into the ground. And so I'm going to take this smaller end, and this is the end I'm going to be pounding into the ground. So I'm going to just sharpen this a little bit, and as I do that, pound into the ground, I can see that here's my bark side. So I'll try to pay attention to that. So I'm just going to make a point here on this. And you can see the shavings are just spraying out all over the place. So I want to catch as many of those as I can. So there's the end I'm going to pound into the ground. And so there's the bark side. And so I want to create some shavings right here. So go down. I'm using my chopping block here. And what I'm trying to do is to get these shavings so that they stay attached to this piece of wood. You'll see why in a minute. Because this is going to be what we get our fire going with, these dry shavings on the inside of this log. So there's my first piece. That's what I want it to look like. And I'm going to make about 6 or 8 more of these if I can. So I'm going to set that to the side. You can see my chips have been accumulating here. These are probably wet out here on the wet ground in this scenario. So the video we might fast forward the video while I'm doing this. So maybe this process here is going to take 5 or 10 minutes of preparation. Sharpen there. See if I can get a real long one. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Just depends on the wood. Sometimes the wood will let you do that, sometimes it won't. I'm grounding it against my chopping block right here, which is pretty helpful. So I'm not going into the wet ground. I've got something solid I'm working against. And I'm moving around the different parts of it, trying to stay away from the bark side to create this fuzz stick, as they used to call it. So there's the second one. Here's a nice edge, so I'm going to make this the sharp in the ground side, and this edge I'm going to get shavings from. So I'm going to sharpen this. Okay, so here we are. We've got our fuzz stick collection here. Got about 6 of them ready to go. We've got some shavings that are dry here on the inside of my raincoat. That's going to be helpful. So now what we want to do is we've got a couple of these, I'm going to call them splits left. I want to try to end up with some thin slivers, something like this, with either my axe or my knife. The axe is going to be easier, so I'm going to try to get some really thin pieces. Thinner the better, but it all depends on what the wood will let you do. This wood is probably a little bit past cured, so it may not let me split. It might just chunk off. Let's give me some pieces like that. That should be okay. That'll work. I want to get some thin slivers because once the shavings get done burning, the next thing that's going to be burning is these slivers. So, and I can pay attention to the bark side versus the dry side when I lay these onto the fire, So here's my dry side right here. So I kind of, as I place these, I'll try to pay attention to which side might be wet or dry, because eventually that's going to dry off, being exposed to the heat. And one thing it's really important that I've learned the hard way is that when you try to build a fire on the ground that's saturated with water, and if you've done everything right, what happens is your fire gets going, it heats up the water in the ground, the water turns to steam and puts your fire out. So you need to have a dry base to start your fire on. So if you got a piece of aluminum foil, that would be great. But in this scenario, we don't have aluminum foil. We're going to have to create a dry base for us to build our fire on so we don't get the steam effect. I've had this situation many times. It's been frustrating. I couldn't figure out what was going on, and I finally said, it's the water in the ground that when it gets hot, it steams, and so we've got to account for that. We've got to deal with it. So I've got a pretty good collection here of thin sticks. Maybe some of these I'll make into a little bit, kind of a mini fuzz stick while I've got the chance. Or make some more shavings. Some of these I can go all the way around. And a lot of times what you can do is find where a knot is, and the knot will stop your knife so the chip stays on the piece of wood. Yeah, maybe there's a knot or hard spot there. That's just going to help that burn quicker, easier. I don't see a knot there, but call these mini fuzz sticks, miniature fuzz sticks. Looks like a lot of work here, but it should be successful. And so maybe it's putting the time in rather than being frustrated with wet wood and giving up and having a cold night without a fire. So this has worked for me. So that's why I appreciate the chance to share it. Okay, I think we're about ready to set this fire up. So we're going to move our materials over to the fire pit and get set up there. Okay, so here's the materials that we've prepared. This is a process here. So we've got our fuzz sticks. We have our pile of shavings right here. And we're going to start to set this up. So I mentioned before that this is going to be wet. It's soaking wet. Imagine it's saturated. In fact, even on a dry day, if you're going into somebody else's campsite and they have doused their fire with water, that's going to be wet and it's going to be difficult to start a fire there. So we need to set up a base of dry material. So I'm going to take some of these thick chunks here and just make a small base to get this fire a little bit off the ground so the heat isn't going down into the ground there. Maybe I can break some of these. So we're just going to make a little base, a little platform of sorts. Doesn't have to be very big. So we're just raising this up off the ground enough to not have any moisture get in. So I'm going to look at my splits here, and I'm going to pick a split right here, and I'm going to put it right about like that. So that's kind of the starting point for where we're going. And then I'm going to look for some other pretty good, decent looking fuzz sticks. I'm going to put these guys right here. I'm going to put one on, I'm going to call that my master stick. And what I'm doing is creating a nest right here to hold shavings. You can see how it's starting to come together. See, that's kind of, those three pieces there have created a little bit of a nest, and we're going to put shavings in there. And we're going to take some of these others and we're going to put them in place so that they're close enough to the fire that the flame can get to these guys too. Let me see if I can push this in better over here on this side. Yeah, I want to get it down a little closer, something like that. Seems tedious. It is, but it works. And maybe it's starting to make more sense of why we did the things that we did. These fuzz sticks seem to be the key. So now I'm going to take some of this other wood. I'm going to just kind of make, here's our nest where we're going to put our shavings. I'm going to make sure when I put the shavings in there that they're going to stay. So maybe I'll put another kind of a retainer out here. We're going to light the fire right in there. And the wind is very important. What direction the wind's coming from. In this scenario, the wind's coming from my back, so I want to be able to block the wind. So I want to get down here to light it. My body is blocking the wind so that I have enough time to get this going and without the wind interfering. So now it's time to gather the shavings from the inside of my raincoat here and start placing them into the nest. Hopefully this is making a little bit more sense now that you can see what's going on. It's tedious, takes some time, but it has worked for me many times, and so it's better than being frustrated or giving up, or maybe have to spend a cold dark night without a fire. There we go. I've got a few of these left, so I want to maybe shore this up in strategic places. Maybe I'm going to lay this across here, and maybe lay another one across here, because we want to get these guys here burning. Now I said I would pay attention to the bark side, so here's the bark side. So I'm going to put that bark side outside, bark side out. Looks like we're pretty good at getting the bark side out. So here's my entryway where I'm going to light. The fire is going to be burning up off the ground in this situation. Anything that falls to the ground is going to fall onto this little tray that we've created. And the other thing I like to look for is what I'm going to call a match extender. So when I light this match, I've only got one match in this scenario, and it's only that long. But if I can transfer that flame to another match extender I'm going to call it, it will allow me to have more time to have that down into the fire, to have a better chance to heat up. Looking for a long sliver. There we go. So when I light my match, I'm gonna huddle down real close, block the wind. I'm gonna get down here like this. I'm gonna light the match. I'm gonna turn the match upside down so that it can get the wood burning. And then I'm going to, as I'm putting the match down in here into the pocket, I'm also going to be placing the match extender so that it can get lit and continue that flame. So let's give it a shot. I'm going to look here and see where my spot is. There's a sweet spot right under here where I'm going to light this. And here we go. Huddled down, blocking the wind. There's the match. And the wind blew it out. So that's really important. We got a swirly, windy day here. So my one match scenario didn't work out, but Let's give it another shot. I'm going to huddle down a little better, a little closer. And I guess you even need to hold your breath. Maybe I was talking and my breath may have blown it out. So let's try this again. Okay. So now, hopefully, you have prepared ahead and gone out and gathered a bunch of wet, small branches that you can put on your fire now and start to dry them off. So these little twigs, this is this place where you get those twigs dried so that they're ready to burn. So you need a handful of twigs and squaw wood, as they call it, to get to the next level. And maybe even to close this in a little bit so that that fire can stay hot, and we want to try to get these things right here burning. It looks like they pretty much are. And any coals are going to drop down here in my dry bed. And so that's the way that how to start a fire with dry wood. I would recommend experimenting with it and trying it, so that when you're in this situation, you're comfortable with it and you can work out some bugs and experiment yourself and have a nice, comfortable, warm fire on a cold, windy night and really enjoy it. So good luck. Thank you for listening and paying attention, and see you in the next video.